It is the dead of a harsh New England winter in 1692. The world outside the small village of Salem is a frozen, unforgiving wilderness. Inside the home of Reverend Samuel Parris, the air is thick with smoke from the hearth, a creeping sense of dread. His young daughter Betty begins to act strangely. His niece Abigail begins to act strangely. They contort their bodies into impossible shapes. They scream out in terror at unseen specters. They bark like dogs. They complain of being pricked by invisible pins. The village doctor is summoned. He finds no earthly cause. His diagnosis is simple and terrifying. The girls are bewitched. This was not just a strange illness. To the people of Salem, this was an attack, a sign the devil had found a foothold. The girls, under pressure, began to name names. They pointed to outsiders, the ones who didn't fit in. They accused Sarah Good. They accused Sarah Osborne. They accused Tituba, Reverend Parris's enslaved servant from the Caribbean. Tituba had once entertained the girls with stories of magic and spirits. To understand the tragedy, look through Puritan eyes. Their lives were hard, ruled by strict religion, constant threat, disease, starvation, conflict. The world was a battlefield between God and the devil. Every misfortune could be Satan's work. Failed crop, sick cow, child's fever. Witchcraft wasn't a fairy tale, it was their science. Trials began spring 1692. A special court was set up. Accused brought forward, often in chains. Primary evidence, spectral evidence. Afflicted girls claimed to see the specter of the accused, impossible to disprove. How do you argue against what only your accuser can see? A closed loop of logic driven by hysteria. Accused guilty until proven innocent. Proving innocence was nearly impossible. They were told to confess and to name other witches. That sparked a cascade of accusations. People implicated friends, neighbors, family. In about a year, 200 plus were accused, 19 hanged, 1 pressed to death, several died in jail. The evidence used in the Salem courtrooms would be dismissed in minutes by any modern legal standard. But in 1692, it was considered compelling and terrifying proof of a diabolical conspiracy. The most dramatic evidence was the behavior of the afflicted girls themselves. In court, they would writhe on the floor. They would scream in agony. They would claim the specter was pinching, biting, choking them. Their performances were so convincing that they swayed judges and juries. Judges and juries saw their torment as undeniable proof. Another form of evidence was the search for the witch's mark. This was believed to be a spot on the body where the devil had branded his servant. Examiners, often a panel of townspeople, would publicly inspect the bodies of the accused. They searched for any unusual mole, wart, birthmark, scar. If a spot was found, it would be pricked with a pin. If the accused did not feel pain or if the spot did not bleed, it was considered a supernatural mark. Confessions were the ultimate prize for the prosecutors. However, these confessions were almost always obtained under extreme duress. The accused were imprisoned in harsh conditions, subjected to relentless interrogation and sometimes even torture. They were told that confessing and implicating others was their only path to survival. Faced with the choice between a certain death by hanging and a potential life through a lie, many chose to confess. These coerced confessions were then used as powerful evidence to condemn others. Let's imagine we could send a modern forensic science team back to 1692. What would they find? They wouldn't be looking for the devil, they'd be looking for data. One of the first things they'd investigate is the environment. A compelling modern theory points to a fungus called ergot. Ergot grows on rye and other grains, especially after a cold, damp winter and spring. Exactly the weather conditions Salem experienced leading into 1692. The village's main grain supply for making bread could have been contaminated. Why is this fungus important? Ergot produces a chemical that is remarkably similar to LSD. The symptoms of ergot poisoning, or ergotism, include muscle spasms, convulsions, hallucinations, crawling sensations on the skin, and paranoia. These symptoms are a near-perfect match for the bewitchment described by the afflicted girls. A toxicologist on our team could test samples of the stored grain from that period. They wouldn't see the devil's work, they would see a clear physical cause. The invisible pins might have been a neurological reaction to a powerful hallucinogen. Next, a psychologist would analyze the social dynamics at play. They would see classic signs of mass psychogenic illness, also known as mass hysteria. This phenomenon often occurs in closed, high-stress communities. It starts with a few individuals experiencing real or perceived symptoms, and then the anxiety and belief spread rapidly through the group. The psychologist would note how the afflicted girls who were powerless in their society suddenly gained immense attention and influence. Their fits gave them a voice they never had before, a classic example of conversion disorder. The story of Salem is more than just a historical curiosity. It's a timeless and powerful cautionary tale about the dangers of abandoning critical thinking in favor of fear and dogma. The people of Salem were not evil, they were human. They were trying to make sense of a frightening world with the limited knowledge they possessed. Their tragedy teaches us that when we allow superstition to take the place of evidence, the consequences can be devastating. They lacked the tools of science, and so they became lost in the darkness of their own anxieties. Science provides us with a method for navigating that darkness. It is a process of asking questions, gathering evidence, testing our beliefs against reality. It forces us to say, "I don't know," which is, honestly, one of the most powerful phrases in human intellectual history. It encourages us to look for natural explanations before jumping to supernatural ones. If the Salem magistrates had been able to test the rye for ergot, or if they had understood the psychology of mass hysteria, the entire tragedy could have been averted. Science is a candle in the dark, illuminating the path of reason and evidence. Today, we face our own complex challenges: climate change, pandemics, misinformation spreading across the internet. Like the people of Salem, we are often confronted with things that are frightening and difficult to understand. The temptation to fall back on simple, fear-based explanations is always there. But the lesson of the witch trials is that we must resist that temptation. We must rely on the scientific method, on data, on peer review, on a willingness to change our minds when presented with new evidence. This is our best defense against the modern-day equivalents of a witch hunt.